I can't help but try to comment on the fact that one of the panelists in the last panel is related to one of the panelists on this. We have the McSweeney morning happening. So you have a chance to hear. Palo Alto School's been going for 23 years, is that right?
Right.
And these two have been the backbone of the school for many, many years. And in some ways, it's the hardest of the schools because, I mean, when we started the school here, we had a captive audience. We had people who had already moved to this area. Even if they didn't come to Ananda, they moved to get away from the structure and tradition of the city. And so we were able to just kind of appeal to that. People didn't want us to test. People didn't want us to compare. Palo Alto is the exact opposite. They're right in the core of people who are very hyper-focused on succeeding in the traditional society, and they've been managed to make this thing happen. And so they're going to share about it with us.
I will introduce myself. My name's Gary McSweeney. Thank you. And very briefly, how I got into education. I was in high school, and I went back to my grammar school to coach a baseball team. And I loved working with kids. And I realized that when you're coaching third graders, you don't need to go over, if there's a runner on second and it's a pop-up, but the umpire doesn't call the infield fly rule, you should fake like you're throwing to, anyway, I got too complicated for my kids, and they're just like, what hand does the glove go on? And so that was a learning. Then when I moved to Ananda, I was at Ananda House. We had a mansion in Pacific Heights, beautiful 5-story mansion, and people would come to Sunday service and they would have their children. And our services are quiet. They're not child-friendly, meaning there's periods of meditation and squirming children. It's not good for them. It's not good for the parents. It's not good for the minister. So I would say, how about if I watch your children so that you can go to Sunday service? And that was how our Sunday school program was born. And I would take the kids down, and I would hang out with them, play with them, take them to a nearby park. There was an owl that lived in a tree right there in San Francisco, and we used to go check out the owl nest. And it was fun. And then I started to feel like, well, the parents are getting something of value at these services. Maybe I could share something of value at an age-appropriate level with children. So I started to try to share a story or do something of a spiritual nature, something to uplift their consciousness. And it was great, great fun. And I stayed in the Sunday school program, both there at Ananda House and then when I moved to Palo Alto for 20 years. And I got pretty involved in it, did it a lot. Janaki Devi, a woman, did just an unbelievable job of trying to hold that together. Living Wisdom schools are very tough, but it's nothing like a Sunday school program. Different children every week, some who've never heard of the teachings or anything, and some who haven't. Just a real quick story. I'm teaching these young children, and I say, let's try to meditate now. And this boy, his name I'll never forget, was Gaspar. He had really thick glasses. And we had this period of meditation. And these are young children. First time he had ever been exposed to anything like this. And I said, how was it for everybody? I mean, any experiences? He goes, yeah, what is it when your breath stops? He'd gone breathless his first time. I still haven't gone breathless after 40 years, so I was a little jealous, and so I made him leave the classroom immediately. No, I'm teasing. Well, it's a cliche, but it's true in this case. I prepared a talk not knowing what this was going to look like. I was trying to visualize this audience, but I did not expect this. And so Usha took a lot of what I was going to say, followed by Nitai, followed by my own son, followed by Erica, Tomari, and Cameron. But the deal breaker was a question and answer period, and now all of you were saying what I was going to say. So basically, everything has been covered. But I'll go back because I'm not a good enough public speaker to just wing it. So I don't know, how many of you have seen the movie Tomorrowland? Okay, 2. It was a colossal failure at the box office. It was a Disney film. It was meant to be their blockbuster for the summer, and it flopped miserably. But, and it's not a well-told story, but it has some message to it that I think pertains, and it's a shame, maybe it'll find its audience, because it really, I was amazed at the message of this film. And George Clooney is an elderly man turning gray, and he's fighting his own cynicism. I don't know why I would relate to a film like that, but anyway, it just goes through many themes. And anyway, the point of it was, they asked kind of this question at the end: what happens when several generations of children are just exposed unadulteratedly to just media and negativity and climate change and war and terrorism and violence, and it's just bombarded with these images? Well, what happens to their consciousness? And then we get kind of upset with them, like, gosh, they're all jaded, they're all cynical. What's wrong with these kids? We're in Palo Alto, and there's an absolute crisis in the local schools. Just beyond, I wanted to keep my talk totally positive, but I just want to touch on it, and I don't need to for all of you because we're preaching to the choir. But there is a crisis out there. And we're in Silicon Valley, where they value innovation and hard work and many of the things that we're talking about today. And to some extent, they're all trying very hard, and meditation is showing up in places you might not expect it, public schools and mindfulness meditation. But getting back to the film, it left me, well, the whole thing in the end is, what's going to give these kids hope? How can we give these kids hope? Is there any context for life? And one of the hallmarks of Living Wisdom School and Education for Life, I think, is that it's hopeful. And I can talk about Kim Jong-un, and I can talk about ISIS, and we're all bombarded with these images, and so are our children. I teach in middle school, and they can spout it off so much better than I can about what's going on in this world, and it creates fear, and it creates a lack of hope and a lack of context. So my dear friend Biasa, he's kind of the spearhead at Ananda for talking about yugas. It's been coming up several times in today's talk. Drapar Yuga, it's an ascending age. So Biasa gives this talk at a conference. I believe it was an educators conference. Very sweet man, very gentle. And this presenter comes up to him afterwards, and he's really upset with Biasa, which is hard to believe that anyone could be upset with Biasa. So Biasa turns to him: I've upset you. Why did I upset you? You have no business giving these people hope. You have none. That's not fair. So that's what we're up against here. Even though we talk, and even though there's all these trends in education, and there's just a lot of talk going on right now in education. But how can we give hope? So this summer, again, I was thrust into public speaking. I had to give a talk on a topic called the redeeming light. And there's a miracle in this reading, and it's about this picture. Yogananda is dying as a child of cholera, and his mother says, pray to this picture, and the light will come out of it, and you will be healed. And it does, and they both see the light. But I have to give a talk about this, and I've learned that you can't really just go read a passage, come out and regurgitate it, because people can do that on their own. And here I am talking to a room full of teachers, so like, I know where that reading is, I could find that. I had to come up with something perhaps original, or at least something I had experienced. Well, I have no experience with redemptive lights or miracles like that. And so then I was thinking, and I thought of two tracks, but only one applies today. I was thinking, okay, Living Wisdom School children, students. Now, this is long before Palo Alto even started a school. I've been coming up here. I could name names of kids, but I have seen children, Ramia, for one, Janica, some of these young kids, and I've been around a lot of kids, Dylan, Ben Skillman, Rama Cryer, just to name a few, because I would come up here and visit them. Then I did the EFL summer camps, and I would take the teenagers off, and we would go canoeing, and I just observed them. I would just be with them for a week. I would see them in all sorts of circumstances. And I noticed something just qualitatively different about these kids. And now, 24 years, I've been involved in the school because the day the school was starting, we sent our son to it. So I was involved in the early years, just getting it up off the ground. And then 15 years ago, I started teaching. So I've seen a lot of children. And I see children come to our school from all different walks of life, from all different families, from all different socioeconomic groups. And they come and they are transformed. I see it, and I don't think I'm imagining it. In fact, I am completely convinced that I'm not imagining it, that it is really real, the redeeming light. So I gave my talk about that. Excuse me. So one of the things I do in my role at school is I edit the end of the year videos. At Palo Alto, each child receives a quality. And they come up and they talk in their own words about why they think they received the quality. In this particular end of the year celebration last year, we had 8 graduates representing about 48 years of time at Living Wisdom School. And it's just it was so moving. I don't know what the words are. It was just so palpable to me how effective this teaching is in this style of education. But the question for me is, first of all, how can I explain that to others? We're talking about marketing. We're talking about, bringing it out to other groups or somebody. How do you explain that? How do you, in Silicon Valley talk, where's the data? How do you prove these things? This is a really tough audience because you guys are so riveted. I'm used to teaching middle school and it's just swarming all over the place. Okay, I remembered my point. So I stumbled upon, like I said, I'm preparing for this talk, and I said, okay, I'll talk about Living Wisdom School kids. But then I thought, how does this work? I mean, I know it's working in Seattle, Portland, Assisi, Slovenia. I just know it. I know it works in Palo Alto, but how? So I stumbled across this brochure that Swami wrote in 1982, and it was called The New Dispensation. And I was reading it, and I just thought, wow, this gives me a real, concrete, specific thread to pick it up by. And this is what I'm going to offer to you as we go off now. I mean, this is a little bubble of joy this week. It's like going to Spiritual Renewal Week, and the big question was always in the old days, okay, how long can you keep that bubble of joy as you go back to your homes in San Francisco and Oakland, and because you're surrounded by like-minded souls, and it's just like, wow. And this week, think about, in a month from now, we'll all be in our classrooms. It'll be a different scene. How do we hold on to that? And the new dispensation, amongst many other things, was Swami talked about, and this gets a little cosmic, but I believe it to be true, and I think it can actually be helpful. A giant stream of consciousness is flooding the planet now. And it's light, and it's the antithesis of the other, of the cynicism, of the negativity, of the darkness. And there are many, 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 many people in education in particular, because it's a field that draws open-hearted, forward-thinking people that are looking for something. But what we have is so, I don't want to use the word unique, but Swami talks about attuning. Rather than creating something new out of nothing, our job is to attune ourselves to that river of consciousness. It's already coming. It's not ours to create out of nothing. I use resources. All of you, will be sharing things. They're all good. I'm in no way saying, either or. But I will say from my personal experience that my best lesson plans, my best ideas for field trips, my best ideas, strategies for working with children and parents have literally all come to me in meditation. And I know that there are different paths, and as this work grows, we're going to have different practices. Anything where you go off, if it's nature, if it's meditation, if it's prayer, whatever. We have teachers at our school that are not on this path, and they're exemplary teachers. One of them's right here. She has her path. But there's got to be some, and it's the topic today that we were given is, how do you keep your class dynamic? How do you keep the school dynamic? It's this way, because it's a grind. I mean, am I the only teacher? We're just sharing. It can really be a grind during the school year, and it's just so much information and so much communication with parents, and sometimes it's a little hard to keep, centered, and to keep that child at the center of your consciousness. And then when I do meditate, and every time when I end a meditation during the school year, I just go through my whole class. I memorize all their names, and I just send them light. And sometimes I've had the experience where conflicts have just dissolved. And if a parent came to me and said, okay, seriously, how did that dissolve? How did we have the breakthrough? And I just kind of go, which doesn't help. Our marketing department is upset with me. But I've seen it enough times, and I'm one of those people, I don't know. There's some people, engineer types, probably Greg here, he's got to know how it works. To me, if it works, I'm happy. If my computer does what it does, I'm cool. And someone said, well, don't you want to know about the hard? No, if you want to show me, I'll listen. He fixes my email when it goes bonkers. So anyway, it's not a state law, but it's basically a law that teachers have to cite the latest research in order to validate what they're saying. So I start reading this article on Saturday, and that's recent. Today's Monday? Okay, that's pretty recent. There's probably a new article this morning. It's time to bring education into the 21st century. I have to admit I'm a little bit jaded. I'm like the George Clooney guy in Tomorrowland. I'm kind of like, I don't know about this stuff, and this school's trying to do this, and they're, but they don't do it. So anyway, I'm reading this, and it starts talking about STEM. I like STEM, I like science, I like technology, I like engineering, and I like math, but I've heard enough of it. And I think education is a lot more complicated than just adding a bunch of STEM to the classroom. But I'm reading it, and I'm kind of my blood pressure, well, I don't know if I really like this. Why did I start reading this article? And then I go, well, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's by this guy, Alan Schusterman. I'm not familiar with him. But then I stumble on this gem. He says, for example, he's talking about socio-emotional learning experience being very real, measurable benefits, including enhanced academic achievement. So that's EFL. For example, in January, Developmental Psychology published a study of grade school students who were taught meditation and mindfulness techniques. After 12 weeks, the students showed a 24% decrease in aggression and a reduction in depression-like symptoms. Palo Alto, well, we've had a rash of teen suicides. The city of Palo Alto spends $500,000 every year to have a person stay at this one place on the railroad tracks to prevent kids from jumping in front. They all go to one high school. These are not dropouts. These are like kids that are doing really well in school by and large. It's crazy. Then they started showing the statistics on how many kids from the local high school end up in the emergency room for psychology, It's 280. They wrote an article this week that the summer is good because the beds are all empty, but as soon as school starts, the beds will start getting full again. And how people can just go kind of on with this and accept it, I don't understand. But this is the one that got me. Plus, after a little meditation or mindfulness, plus a 15% improvement in math scores. Now, this is one of those things, I don't know how we would ever kind of win the day. But the middle school, we energize every morning. We go for a walk, we energize, we sit to meditate, and then we go right into math. It just seems so natural to us. And so many of our practices, I was talking to a friend about marketing, and it's a big adventure for us now, this next thing about marketing, to try and get the word out. But I would say this is kind of my 2 cents worth. As we expand and as we go out there, it might be a good idea to remember that what we have now is so valuable. There is a local school that's well known for emotional social training. And one of the parents, well-meaning parents, said, you guys should go there and you guys should get your training at such and such a school. Helen, who can be feisty, said they should be sending their faculty to our school for training. And I just said that I don't want to get egoic about it, but look at Living Wisdom School. There isn't an ego in this room. I mean, Nitai and Hridai, everyone's like so sweet and, and the rest of these people are out there going, well, our school's so great and we're so wonderful and we're the best and we have this innovative lab school. And I'm just like, well, maybe. But a 40-year track record, we didn't just fall off the turnip truck. So through our meditation and through our practices, and when I see Kamran and I see the next generation, I'm just like, yes, because that means I can retire soon.
When did you ever see the last turnip train?
It's an old expression.
Well, where to begin? You know, I have been in this business of education for over 45 years. And so I have had quite a learning curve. And that curve has included university, high school, both in the public and the private sector, and elementary school at Living Wisdom in Palo Alto. And I've learned a great deal. Some of that curve includes a period of time in which I did not know about Education for Life. The book hadn't been written. I hadn't met Swami Kriyananda. And yet, I was learning. I do remember, one of the lessons I learned was to be really open as a teacher and not to go in with an agenda that precluded any input from anybody else. Because then you're talking about a dictatorship as opposed to a community. And that occurred at Butte College over in Oroville, American Lit class, and they were supposed to write these wonderful literary papers. And the students, it was right during the end of the Vietnam War. There were student protests. I had hippies in my class. I had Aggies in my class. I mean, it was wild. And the hippie section all got hot and bothered, and they came to me as a group, and they said, "We don't want to write your papers." And I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" God was with me. And they said, "We want to do projects. We want to do something that's meaningful." And I said, "So writing and literature isn't meaningful?" And they said, "Yeah, but we want to do it, in this way." And I thought for a moment, and I thought, okay, let me include their reality in mine. And I said, "All right, do your project. I'm going to give you that, but write about it." And so because I was reasonable and really listening to them, they went along with it. That particular semester was a standout in my career as a teacher. They were not just kids, they were young adults. Some of them were 18, 19, some of them were 25, and some of them were 35. And they went out. I remember the fellow who chose Thoreau. It was before the technology revolution. He had a little tape recorder. He goes out into the woods, and he taped the sounds. And he came back, and we darkened the classroom, and he lit his candle, and he read Thoreau with reverence as he played the background tape. And everybody in the class was so with him. And the girls, 2 of them who chose Moby Dick, they choreographed a chapter, and they performed the choreography from Moby Dick in front of the entire class. Who would have thought? And then one of the other people came up to me and she said, "I want to do a project on poets and war," because we had the Vietnam War. And I said, "Well, what do you have in mind?" And she said, "Well, I want to do their astrological charts." And I mean, that was really stretching it for me at the time. And I said, "Who do you have in mind?" And she said, "Well, T.S. Eliot and Stephen Crane and Hemingway." And I thought, well, she's thinking, and there are correlations there. And I don't know what the heck she's going to say about their astrological charts, but who cares? She's going to read them. She's going to take out of them certain key points, and then maybe I'll learn something too. And by George, I did. And then it went on from there. So that was a huge learning. I wasn't much older than some of the students. As a matter of fact, some of those students were older than I. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure, but I think Jonica Davey was in my class. Maybe she wasn't in that class. So that was the beginning of my journey of EFL, even though I never had heard the word Education for Life. And it happened in a small community college with this ragamuffin group of students who were just being who they were, and I met them where they were. It was the grace of God. Now you can flash forward to after I had come to Ananda and been part of the discussions with Swami Kriyananda at the very beginning, after he'd just written the book, Education for Life. And he called a few of us together, and we were brainstorming, how do we get this out? Does that ring a bell? How do we get this out? What was it, 86 or 87, Nitai? 86. And we did try to get it out at that time. We've been trying ever since. But during my time from 86, somewhere between 86 and 90, I got a part-time job. I was living at the community. I got a part-time job at Sierra College in Rockland, teaching, well, that time it was English 1A, writing. And I remember distinctly, this is another class. Some classes are memorable. I walked in the first day, and I began to talk to the class, orient them to what they could expect. I had my syllabus. I was prepared. And I noticed right away that there was an energetic divide in the class. And on this side of the class, right about where you're sitting, was this young man, and he was dressed sloppily. He was slouched in his chair. His hair came over his eyes. And he was talking the whole time to his friend as I was trying to get the class on board. And I thought, uh-oh, this is a kid with either heavy energy or you know. And so we go on, and I keep at it, but he's still there, and I'm thinking, I don't want to give him the attention that he's obviously trying to get. And then what I noticed was that as I avoided him energetically, on this side of the class, there was my angel student. And he was just there. He was just vibrating readiness. Tell me everything you know. I want it. and so I gave him. He actually drew my energy, and everybody around him drew my energy. So I made it through the class, and I went home, and I really thought hard about what was I going to do. Because I knew from previous experience in a high school class in American Lit, I had 3 kids who informed me the first day of class, we are going to sabotage your class, they said. And they proceeded to try to do it. And I remember one day in that class, I mean, it was pandemonium. They wouldn't listen to me. And I had 3 little Christian girls sitting in the front, so pretty, so cute, so Christian. And one of the little girls says to me, she mouths it. She never said it out loud. She said, say stop. And I thought, all right, stop. And they did. But the truth was that they didn't really stop, because I ended up having to deal with them and send them out of class. By Thanksgiving, they were gone. So I knew that I wanted to do something different with this kind of energy over here in the devil side of the room. And I said to myself, I remembered what, was it Sri Yukteswar or was it Master who said, don't fight the darkness with a stick, don't beat the darkness with a stick, but turn on the light? Who said that? Yukteswar. And I remembered that. And so I strategized. I went back to the class, and I mentally divided that class, a straight line down the middle. This side was the fellow in the, I'll call him the dark angel, and on this side was the light angel. And I never crossed that line. I never wrote on that side of the blackboard. I never made eye contact with anybody on that side of the room. I simply was myself with the light side of the room. And the next class, I came to class, and I noticed that there had been a change in the dynamic, and more people were on the light side of the room. And I continued to do that for a couple of weeks, at the end of which only my nemesis was here with 2 of his buddies, and everybody else was on this side of the room. And it was crowded. So I thought to myself, I have won, but not really, because I haven't won him. And I came to the class the next time, and I said, we have a change in plan. we're going to create a circle instead of having a linear configuration of the desks. This is college. You don't necessarily do this at college. And so they all got up and they did it. And what that did was create community in that classroom in a metaphorical way, even though it wasn't the reality yet. And I just talked, and my custom was, as they wrote, I would pick out areas from each paper that did something very well, and I would share it. I would say, so-and-so, look what he did with this. Look at how he managed to make this whole thing so cohesive, and this other person was so descriptive, and so forth. And every single time I got an assignment in, I waited for this one fellow's paper to do something that I could use, and it never happened. He was a lousy writer. I mean, you have to be authentic. I couldn't pretend that there was something there until, it's good to wait. One day, he wrote a stunning metaphor. And I came to class and I said, I'm going to share as I usually do. And I said his name, so-and-so, has written this paragraph that really works, and I want you to hear it. When I said his name, I noticed that not only did he look at me and make eye contact, but he sat up in his chair, and most tellingly, he took his hand and pushed his bangs aside. And I thought, wow, this is powerful stuff, And that's not the end of the story, because things always take time. But every day thereafter, I noticed he would be sitting opposite me, where Brian is sitting. Every day he came closer and closer and closer to me in the circle until one day I walked in and he had positioned himself in the chair next to mine. So by Thanksgiving, we were friends and we could talk, and he was, a vibrant part of the class. And I thought, as I was thinking of this talk, all of you have experiences like that. And our challenge, I believe, is to duplicate them, to make those the experiences of every day, make the extraordinary ordinary. Now, when Nitai gave me this assignment to talk to you, he said, I think you should talk about how to make your classroom in school dynamic. And so as I thought about that, I thought, everybody's going to be talking about aspects of that, and you haven't disappointed at all. But what I think I can bring to the table, perhaps, is to talk about it in terms of a director's point of view. I mean, it's really quite different than a teacher's point of view. I started out as a teacher. I had many years as a teacher, 3 years before I became the full-time director at Living Wisdom School in the classroom. But now, for the last 15, 16 years, I've been up in the office. I do teach, and that's wonderful, because that's the humanizing part of my job. But it's not the only humanizing part of my job. One of the other areas that is so challenging and so meaningful is working with my parents. I have two of them here, Lana and Greg. And that's my job. I have to really work to keep the whole school dynamic so that energy goes out and that magnetism draws the children who need to be with us in. Now, I don't do it alone, obviously. I mean, I'm just one person, and it's the teachers. It's every aspect of the school that contributes to that flow of energy that I put into that. But I have a particular vantage point because I'm up in my office, and I'm the entry level point. And I'm also the exit point, occasionally, not very often. I really enjoy working with parents who either are attuned or who want to be attuned to what we're doing, to our philosophy. That is so gratifying. And I'm going to give you an example. I have open houses, several times a year. The teachers come, and I start those open houses by giving a few remarks to our prospective parents. I guess it was in the spring of this year, must have been in the spring, I began my talk. It's different every time. It's whatever's on my mind. I began my talk by saying to the parents, there must have been 35 parents out there, I realize that all of you simply want your children to be happy, that is your ultimate goal for your children. So I'm going to assume that, and then I'm going to show you how that plays out in our school. And I went on to talk about the academics, the social emotional development, the school rules, which are here, which epitomize so much of our spirituality, classroom management, you name it. And then they all go around and they talk to the teachers, and they talk to me, and then they go home. And the next step is to make an appointment with me, to come in and talk about their individual child and the possibility of enrollment. Well, these two parents made an appointment, and they came in and sat in my office. And I said, well, how did you come to this point of wanting to talk to me? And they said, well, after your presentation at the open house, we realized that we had never verbalized or even conceptualized the idea of happiness as our main goal for our child. Now that just seems unbelievable, doesn't it, to us? But actually, think about it. There is so much energy out there about success as it is defined by a materialistic world. And personal happiness, spiritual happiness, doesn't really enter in a lot of times. So, but that wasn't the end of it. I said, wow. I said, that's really great. And then they said, we talked about it for 4 days, nonstop. And I thought to myself, double wow. Isn't that great that these are thinking parents who are willing to entertain a new perspective? And then they said something that I found just in a way devastating, but in another way hopeful. They said, in the course of our conversation, we realized that at some point in our education, we had stopped being learners and we had become competitors. And, most telling of all, we don't know when that happened, but we do know that it informed the entire rest of our education and that it was early on. Now, that's the tragedy, and that's the hope, because it's terrible to think and to realize that so many of the children today are caught up in a system that functions that way. Competition, grade point average, standardized testing, which high school, which college, and they're still in kindergarten. I want my child to go to, and you fill in the blank. But on the other hand, there is this dawning awareness of how not only futile that is, but how destructive that is. And so they opened the door for me to begin to talk very seriously about the potential of an education for life, and especially a Living Wisdom School education for their child. They were ready. It's like when you have kids in your class and they are ready, There's something so beautiful about that. And that was only one example. I mean, it happens over and over again. The parents who come through my office, each set, have their own trajectory, their own journey of what brought them there. And it's all over the map. And the reason it's all over the map is that education for life helps everyone. Sometimes I get parents in there and they say, well, we're really thinking about you, but we're also thinking about a school for the gifted. And I mean, you just want to beat them. Maybe we're going to edit that out.
It's live streaming.
Gary says it's live streaming. Let me explain what I mean. It's just that I just had a week with my grandchildren, and they lived in my apartment. And it was beautiful, don't get me wrong. These are my grandchildren, and they are delightful children. They are challenging children. They are children. And it gave me a new appreciation, or a renewed appreciation, for what all of you go through who teach those little ones. I mean, it's 6 to 1.5. And when they left, I was exhausted, I have to admit. So back to parenting, I have a deep, deep appreciation for the challenges of parenting. And I have to go back to something that Gary said. You know, he, I, all of you have all this experience for the most part. Maybe not Brian yet. All this experience. We've seen hundreds of kids come through. And we've seen where they started and where they ended. And we've also noticed how, when they leave us, they walk through the world in a different way. In a way that is so obvious that people comment on it. I had parents come through my office who say, I saw your kids at the park, and I noticed how they played. And when I talked to them and asked them what school they were from, they were just so polite and respectful. So there's stories after stories. What I love with my parents is the opportunity that I get with the teachers, because the teachers are in close communication with them. But every now and then I really do get opportunities to be a partner with them in this enterprise called the education of their children. And because our school is informed by the school rules, and if you get a chance, read them, and there's some over there, you can certainly take them. There is a sense of joy. There's a sense of openness. There's a sense of something really wonderful is happening in our school. And I say that not in a braggadocio kind of way. I say that because people who are total strangers come onto the campus and they tell me that they see it, they feel it, they don't know how to explain it, but it's there. And I will say, how do you know? And one person said to me, I didn't know how I knew. I just felt it when I walked on, and then I knew when I saw the eyes of your children. They're shining. And my parents bring us stories back like that. I mean, sometimes, you get into battle and you forget the larger picture, so it's nice to hear these stories. I had a parent last year who said to me, she noticed that as she picked up people in her carpool from other schools, because her kids all went to the same, I don't know, jiu-jitsu class or some class like that, she said she'd come to our school and our kids jaunt to the car. And they're laughing and they're talking and they're full of energy at the end of the day. She goes to pick kids up from other schools and they're coming out and they're trudging. And their energy is low. And I said, really? Because I don't go around to other schools. And she said, no, Helen, really, this is true. So what I want to do as the principal and the director of my school is somehow support our parents who are open and ready for it to become more attuned to something that is not easily articulated. We don't have an algorithm for it. And what are we to do because we live in Silicon Valley? Everybody has an algorithm for everything. A plus B equals C. It doesn't work that way. It's that stream of consciousness that comes out of the ether through the masters to this planet, that by some great good fortune we've had an opportunity to delve into. Now, the other aspect of this with parents is that if you want parents to become attuned to your school, it becomes very important for them to become involved. And yet you can't have parents running in and out of the classrooms. It just doesn't work that way. The teacher puts a lot of energy into creating an energetic community, into creating a rhythm, a flow. The teachers know what they're doing, and they have had many more experiences with children than parents of 2 or 1. So how to do that? Well, there are so many avenues, and our parents are wonderful. They jump up and they say, I'll do it. And what they're saying is, I'll be a field trip driver, or I'll take over the concessions for the school play, or whatever it is, I'll fix the computers. And in some cases, as in Lana's case, let me come in for math. And you can differentiate with the variety of adeptness in the class with the kids, because I'll be one more set of hands. So it works that way. But there's another really key way that parents can feel involved. And that, I think, is financially. You know, in Silicon Valley, have you noticed the rents recently? All of our teachers, I don't think any of our teachers owns their own house. We all rent. And the rents are, as everywhere down there, are rising exponentially. And so it is incumbent upon us as a school to support our teachers so that they can be free to really put their whole selves into their classes. And I really feel that that's my responsibility, and I share it with Gary as president of the board. We really work together on this. So how to do that? Yes, we live in a very wealthy area. Yes, we are in the lower quadrant of tuitions in that area. You know, these are the facts and the realities. You have this dream. How do you manifest it? And so every year I go to our parents and I say, we have a tea. And actually, we do use a strategy. We take their children and we say, all your children are going to perform for you, and so you have to come. And so their children sing a couple of songs, and then we get the children out of there, and they have a wonderful time, and we give them pizza, and they're just happy as anything. And with the parents, we give this just beautiful but simple high tea. And Gary gets up, and he simply explains the financial realities of the school. I mean, because it's a partnership. It's us, but it's the parents. And it's also a circle. Parents, school, children. It's a community. And everybody in the community has to support it in every way, financial as well. And so we're very honest. We say, you know, we can't do it on your tuition alone. We have a lower tuition because we want the diversity. And boy, have we got diversity. And that's a good thing. You know, we have a whole Russian community. We have the Chinese, we have the Japanese, we have the Hindus, we have, you know, Buddhists and Catholics, and you name it, we've got it. And we're just honest in a respectful kind of way. And do you know that's the only fundraiser we do all year long? But it goes all year long. There's just an expectation. Please just give as you can. And those who can give more, please give more. That's the reality. And those who can't, please give, because participation, that kind of energy, is really important. And you know, I think that because we're so respectful and so honest with our parents, that the outpouring, the return on that simple little thing is wonderful. Now, has it always been that way? No. I think that in the early years we really struggled, really struggled. But when I came in, I recognized the fact that the other part of the equation is the teachers. And they need to be supported to the degree that they don't have to scramble in order, you know, live hand to mouth, so that they can really put their energies where they need to be. And so little by little, we raised the tuition, and as we raised it, we raised the salaries. We're not even in, well, we're getting nearer. We're in the ballpark now after 23 years of initial remuneration for teachers in the area. And I think it is time, energy, and money really well spent. You know, our teaching staff is amazing. And that's the other aspect I wanted to talk about. Do I have time? 5 minutes? Okay. So you have the parents, and I'm the director, and I'm not up in any ivory tower, believe me. In the morning, when the parents come through the drive-through, I'm out there and I've got my broom, and I'm sweeping. And I'm always reminded of the story of the devotee whose guru said, you know, fetch water, chop wood. So I'm out there with my broom, and I'm sweeping, and I'm fetching water and chopping wood in my mind as a spiritual practice. But what I am also doing is operating as the welcome committee for every child who comes to school that day. And I say, good morning. And they learn, if they don't already do it, to say good morning to me. And some of them even say, Helen, how are you? You know, it's these amenities. But more than that, I'm there for the parents. They can talk to me, they can pull me aside, they can give me a tuition check, they can do, you know, but it really is such a tiny, tiny little thing. Now, multiply that 100-fold, and now we can talk about our teachers. What happens when you have the care and nurturing of a faculty? All I can say is that when you have teachers who have energy and who have a spiritual practice, you're ahead of the game. So when I go out and look for teachers, I am really looking for that. Yes, we have to have people who are professional, who know how to deliver curriculum, and who are open to education for life, if not already schooled in education for life. So we have to have that. But I always look for a teacher who has a spiritual practice. And I especially look for a teacher who meditates. Our teachers, and I include all of you in this, our teachers have to be so intuitive. And what is intuition? Intuition, yes, it's based on knowledge and experience, but it's also the ability to quiet the mind and go into the heart, to be very, very still, and out of that comes new understanding. And in this case, an understanding of the soul in front of you. So often, when things come up in our school with one child, that teacher will bring that to the faculty meeting. And as a faculty, we will train our minds, our hearts, and our souls on that. And the whole faculty gets together, and everybody puts out energy in whatever direction it is. Maybe a little child is going through a difficult time. Everybody in the faculty singles that child out for special attention. It's amazing what a united group of people who meditate, it's amazing what they can do. So yes, I look for teachers who have all of those qualities. And I look for teachers who laugh. You should be in our faculty meetings. If you get a sourpuss on your faculty, God bless you. I don't have any. I have people who come to faculty meeting, and I have my little agenda, and we go through it, and people add, and all of this. And then we're laughing so hard, and we're so engrossed with whatever is going on, and people are all joining in. Finally, I say, enough is enough, go home. And it's 5:00. And we do that every week. So the caliber of an Education for Life school, or maybe the litmus test, is the joy level of the children, the joy level of the parents, and the joy level of the teachers. And whatever we have to do to keep it high, let's keep doing it.